I didn't expect myself to get into weddings, but I love weddings. Like, I know some people hate it, but I love going to a wedding. I love shooting a wedding. I'm happiest when I'm at a wedding. I just love a wedding.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Artist Date. I'm your host, Nicole Romanoff, and today's episode is all about storytelling, whether it's in journalism, wedding films, or beyond. My guest today is Laura Woodward, a full-time journalist at CTV News and a wedding videographer who has filmed over 100 weddings. She shares how she balances both careers, the similarities between news and wedding films, and how she found her unique storytelling style. We also get into the trends in videography, what makes a great wedding film, and even some behind-the-scenes stories from her latest creative project in Paris. Plus, she shares her best advice for couples choosing a videographer and why collaboration with photographers on a wedding day is so important. Whether you're a videographer, photographer, or just love hearing about creative journeys, this episode is packed with inspiration and insight. Let's get into it. I'm having you on today because you were recommended by your good friend Delaney.
Oh, Delaney, she threw me here, hey?
She did, because I'm always like, do you have any recommendations for people that you think would be good for the podcast? And she's like, I do. Yeah. And then she was telling me this story of how you did your first wedding with like the broadcast camera. Is this true?
Can't confirm or deny that maybe the CTV equipment was used in the early films. Yeah.
Oh
and it's full circle moment because now I use some of my like cameras that are even better than the CTV cameras for the CTV shoots. So it's full circle.
Really?
But yeah, but my first wedding was my coworker.
Okay.
Who, worked at CTV together and filmed her wedding. She didn't have a videographer. And I was like, well, I could probably do that.
There you go.
And kept going.
Here you are today. Yeah, doing the double hustle.
Yes.
So maybe before we get into the interview, I'll have you just share who you are.
Okay, that's a big question. Well, I'm so excited to be on a date with you. It's our first date.
I know, it's our first date.
And I hear you're
a blind date.
Yeah, it's a blind date. You're a good first date, I've heard.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh. So flattered to hear that. I'm blushing.
Yeah. So, my name is Laura. I work at CTV News full-time as a reporter. And then the side hustle is running a videography business, mostly weddings. Mm-hmm. And I say Monday to Friday, I do news. And then on Saturday, it's a fun wedding. So kind of a good balance of both, right? Like serious. And then I get to go pop some champagne and have some fun on the Saturday.
On the weekends. Yeah. Are you booked every weekend?
It's pretty busy for sure in the summer. I try to limit myself. And then I'm like, oh, it's so hard to say no, So
it is hard to say no. Especially if it's something that you love and enjoy. I find that that's really where it's hard to like say no. Mm-hmm. You know, you almost have to reach that like breaking point of like, okay, this is too much. And then, you learn that you're like, okay, maybe I can't say yes every single time because I'm about to die.
I've never had a baby, but I think of it kind of similar where like you forget the pain of wedding season. Right. And then you're like, oh it'll be fine. And then you're in it. You're like, oh, what have I committed to?
How many years have you been doing this?
It's been about 5 years.
5 years?
Mm-hmm. So I've shot over 100 weddings and I do about 20 a year.
Wow.
It's a lot of footage.
And then do you edit at all?
Yes. Yeah.
When you finish a wedding, how many hours of footage are you like rooting around through?
Oh, it's a lot. Like I listen to a lot of speeches, a lot of wedding vows. Yeah. I've never had to give a wedding speech, but I think I could give a good one based on how many I've heard. Like
that's hilarious. Do a lot of the weddings end up sounding the same? Like, is it almost like a recipe? You know what I mean? From wedding to wedding, is it like, oh, I've heard this before? Oh, I've almost like cookie cutter.
There's some of the same jokes I hear a lot. Like, that's a beautiful dress. It's much different than the pants you normally wear in the relationship. But as for like editing the video, I find I try not to stick to a script or stick to a cookie cutter like blueprint. Like it is different. I try to make each one different and make each one unique because each wedding is unique. Like, yes, there are the same elements, but they're so different. Like each couple, some are more quirky, some are like more outgoing. And, sometimes they have like an unhinged father of the bride, right? And he's like making crazy jokes. Like, of course that has to like be in it versus, maybe a different wedding is more quiet and, more romantic, then like the vibe will be different. And so, yeah, each video is unique and different, and I try not to stick to one formula.
Do you shoot with film, or is it all digital, or a combination of?
I started shooting Super 8.
Oh, nice.
This year, actually.
Okay, where are people getting all these Super 8 cameras?
I got mine on eBay. So, but I've seen, online mostly, or you can find one, maybe dig up in the attic.
Was it fun to play with?
Yeah, but it was weird not being able to like see it, right? Like you shoot and then you're like, I'm so used to see, especially even on your cell phone, like what it looks like and you're like, is this good? So you're just like, well, say a prayer. And
where did you get it developed?
I mail it to New York, to Negative Land.
Negative Land. I've never heard of that. Where did you come across them?
Oh, I think I was just Googling around deep on Instagram, like other videographers.
Yeah.
And they like tag where they get there.
Right. You kind of do some
digging. Yeah.
So let's talk about how your journey began. Mm-hmm. You said that you did a wedding for a colleague at work. Mm-hmm. And so was this something that you had always kind of hoped for yourself or saw for yourself in the future? Or was it something that kind of evolved unexpectedly?
I would say unexpectedly, like I shot news, like that's what I do. It's pretty like formulaic, there's one shot, whereas this is more creative, and that's kind of where I fell in love with it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not so cookie cutter, like you can be so creative, you can have different shots, and that's what made me fall in love with it, because I get to be more creative than, I don't know, if you watch a news story, it's very, I won't say it's boring in the sense of the way it's edited. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I didn't expect myself to get into weddings, but I love weddings. Like I know some people hate it, but I love going to a wedding. I love shooting a wedding. I'm happiest when I'm at a wedding. I just think I just love a wedding.
Is your day, does it start quite early or does it vary throughout, or do you have packages for your weddings?
Okay. So it's just kind of, there's an elopement package and then there's a full day package. Mm. So it's pretty basic, and it's kind of, I don't want to say one size fits all, but I was trying to cater it to fit different needs, but it's kind of a weird thing versus photography where it's by hours. Like almost I need enough footage in order to put something together. So I need to be there for a certain amount of hours, because then I'm almost like screwing myself if I'm not.
Right.
Because then I don't have enough to play with, and then I'm like scrambling for footage and it's harder to edit. So if I'm there for longer, then it actually is beneficial.
And I suppose it's putting together a story. And so you kind of have to follow them throughout the day to catch all those little clips to make it kind of make sense and to create that like well-rounded video.
Exactly. Like if I just have ceremony footage, well, that's a really boring video.
Yeah. And even for you to edit, you'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't love weddings so much, but. So what led you to pursue both the journalism and videography? Do you feel like they complement each other well? Mm-hmm.
I think they're very different, but a lot of the elements, I think they're the same. But I really love both. Like people ask, would you ever want to go full time into videography? Like that's your thing. But I truly love being a journalist. I love being a reporter. I love covering news. I love going to court and sitting in on a murder trial. I love meeting new people, interviewing the mayor. Like this is such an exciting job for me that I don't want to give it up. Like, and it seems weird to say because most people want to quit their day job, right? Like that is the goal, but I feel fortunate enough that I love both, and that's why I want to pursue both. And I would say to your question about, are they similar? Are they different? Like there are things that I've learned in journalism that I apply to weddings. So very early on in journalism school, I was taught your first shot in a news story, in a video news story, should be like a first date. Like it should be a really intriguing first shot, because if it's not, you don't want to go on the second date. Why would you stick around for date 3? Like, why would you stick around? So you have to have a really good first shot. And so that's something I use in news and also in weddings, right? Like I don't want to build to the best shots. I want to start with it, get them in, right? Like you're on a good date. Let's go for date number 2. Keep watching to minute number 3, right? So that's kind of, there's been some overlaps, and even the way I structure a news story and I structure a wedding video, it's not so different. Like I write everything out. So for news, I like transcribe all the interviews, right? I transcribe all the wedding vows. I transcribe all the wedding speeches.
How do you use that in your videos?
Yeah, so then I'll see it all written out, and then that kind of helps me form how I'm going to edit this, because I see the certain clips that I want, and so I'll write. I pick out what I want, and then I'll put it in a separate document. So I have all these speeches and vows, and then I pick the parts that I like. That's like the next step. And then from there, I cut it down further until, because it can't be too long of a video. And then I organize which speech is gonna go where, which vow is gonna go where. And then I kind of write out key shots. I think of the key shots. Okay, we have the cake cutting, we have the first kiss, we have them walking down the aisle, we have the bride, like key moments. I write out all the key moments I have. Oh, there was a really good shot of them popping champagne. That's another key moment. And then I write where that's going to go.
I love that process.
Yeah, but that's how it works in news too. Like we write out, okay, I'm going to start with this shot, then I'm going to go to this interview clip with the prime minister, then I'm going to cut to this interview. Like it's the same.
Like there's a lot of thought that goes into it.
Yeah.
Next time I watch the news, which is every day.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to keep that in mind, because man, that's a lot of work. Like,
and then it gets vetted too. Like I'll write out my news script and it has to get vetted, and someone will say, you know what, like this actually isn't super balanced. Like we need to hear more from, this political party in order to make it more balanced, or we need to have a longer clip here because they're overpowering. Like it's off balance.
Interesting. So leaning one way or the other, like either right leaning or left or whichever. Okay.
Or even just like, okay, we're hearing way too much. There's a minute worth of clips from this person. Like we got to cut it down.
Yeah. I could see how that would really help you in kind of creating that storytelling aspect in your wedding videos. When you're editing your videos, do you have someone kind of like review it? Because like you said, with your news stories, you have someone vet it. Mm-hmm. But before you send it to your client, do you have anyone look it over to see perhaps like, is this story like flowing right? Or do you get any feedback on it before you send it? Or is it just kind of your decision and then you're like, away it goes?
Sometimes I'll get like friends or family to look it over just to make sure. I'm like, is this weird, or does this make sense? And it's something I struggle with, and I don't know if you do as well, just like the perspective of the wedding video, because like their vows might have inside jokes in it, but I don't understand it, but who am I to cut it?
Right.
Like why it makes sense to them, like they're my client. But then I also think, well, maybe the average person viewing it, like, a guest at their wedding.
Reference.
Yeah, knows that reference, or maybe they don't, or maybe I think of like their grandma watching it. I'm like, oh, maybe that's like too risque for like, if there's like a crazy thing on the dance floor, is there too much drinking in this video? Like, it's so weird to think of the perspective of who's going to watch this. So sometimes I'll show it to a friend and I'm like, do you like this? And they're like, yeah, but I don't really get this. And I'm like, oh, but it'll make sense to them. Like, so I struggle with that though.
Right. Do you enjoy the editing process, or do you prefer the actual shooting?
I think I love editing. Like if it was up to me, I would just edit. I love being at a wedding, and I think it's important that they work tandem together, because when I edit, I know who the people are at the wedding, because I build relationships with these people, and I start to know, oh, okay, grandma flew in from Mexico or England, or this guest is from abroad, and oh, this is a childhood friend she hasn't seen, or, you start to pick up on the relationships of who's important and to make sure they're in the video. So I think it's important who shoots the video also edits the video. And I know that's not everyone does that, but to me, I have to be there. But I love editing.
I could see you being really good in like a director role, because you understand, it seems like the full scope of what's going on, like the storytelling aspect and like where to be and where to shoot and everything. And even just like your personality, like you have this sort of like large in charge personality. I could see you like, I don't know, if you're like
action,
maybe you'll be directing like documentaries and videos.
I'd love it.
I feel like I'm cheating a bit because I know that
that is what I would like to do. No, it's true. I would love to shoot a documentary. That would be awesome.
Is there a topic in particular that interests you?
I just think of a documentary as being so big and so overwhelming that and it's your life. And, that's kind of the best part of being in news is like, I do one story today and tomorrow it's a completely different story. And I never take my work home with me and every day is a new day. Whereas like big projects, like a documentary is like intimidating to me because you have to take it on for so long and it's like your whole life and,
Just going back to the aspect of like storytelling in both journalism and videography, what, in your opinion, makes a great story?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's like a news piece or shooting a wedding.
I think it's the people. Like, I think we connect so much with other people and their little quirky bits. Like, I love learning more about a person's family when I shoot their wedding. I love learning more about people that I interview and, not hiding their personality. Like, I think sometimes in wedding videography, I try and, make things like look a certain way. Like, if a chair is out of line at the ceremony, that's one example of like making sure it looks a certain way or setting things up, but just letting it be
unfold as it is.
Yeah, I think is what really sets both news stories and wedding films apart, right? Like having it raw, having it unique to the couple versus like
staged.
Yeah, staged or cookie cutter or following that recipe, like taking it as it is. And depending on the day, it looks different.
And I think people kind of appreciate that too, right? Mm-hmm. That candidness.
But when I started, it was like, it wasn't like that. It was like everything. I remember hating if a shot was too shaky. Like I would put it through Warp Stabilizer on Premiere Pro, which like tries to make it stable because I hated even just a little bit of shakiness. Like it was so like the videos were so slow. Mm-hmm. They were like cinematic. They were like, like it was just like very sad. Like the point of a wedding video was to make you cry. And if you weren't crying, like almost you failed if it wasn't sad and your client wasn't crying. Right. And I was like, this is so strange to me because, when I'm at a wedding, it's fun. It's like, I'm laughing, I'm on the dance floor. There's funny speeches. Like, I'm drinking, it's
right.
fun.
It should be a happy time. Yeah. A happy event. I agree.
So I was like, why are these videos so sad? Mm-hmm. So then I started to incorporate more like dance floor footage and, more things and change the music, make it more upbeat and try to make the day reflect the day.
What you're saying is maybe not focusing so much on grandma's tears and like the sappy speeches, but more like changing that energy.
Totally.
So the choices you make in your edits.
Or having both exist, right? Like it can be, there's slow parts in my wedding videos, but then there's also the dance floor, right? Whereas like when I started, I really wouldn't shoot a lot of the dance floor because I was like, it doesn't fit the mold. Like this has to be a sad video. We have to cry. I can't have like the best man doing the worm. It doesn't fit the mold. And it's like, okay, but who am I to make the mold?
Did you feel like you were falling into that trap of following what everyone else was doing, sort of like the trend at the time? Mm-hmm. And do you feel like now you've kind of embraced a style that's your own and you're paying less attention to maybe what other people are doing and just kind of doing what you feel inspired to do and what you feel like is unique to you?
I think I'm always paying attention to what other people are doing. Yeah. It's just like in the nature of the business. But I think like what is in trend now is what I'm doing, to be frank. Like Super 8 is in trend and I'm shooting Super 8. There are more like candid moments in videography now versus slow. And that's what I'm doing too. But I just think that like what's come in trend has like really, it's clicked for me. Like that is what I like right now. And I don't know if it's because I like to follow the trend of what's happening, but it feels like such a more natural fit. Whereas like when the trend was super slow, I was like struggling to exist in that space because I I have an upbeat personality. I like the dance floor. Like I like, laughing. I like those laughing shots. I don't want it to always just be so sad and serious, but I felt like those shots couldn't be in the video because they had to be sad and serious. So
that's interesting. Yeah.
So now that, the trend has shifted, I feel myself more aligning with that, and I don't plan on leaving that type of space. Yeah.
Good for you. I was just thinking that whole trend game, if it doesn't feel unique to you, it can feel stifling and like you can feel really boxed in, because I know that I would say more so when I started out and I was really trying to understand what it is that I enjoyed shooting and what style I, gravitated to. And so I would just kind of like see what everyone else was doing and just kind of model my work after that a little bit. But I feel like that's a trap in a way, because it's easier to judge your work against others because it's not necessarily authentic to you. And so you're not like maybe connecting with it, and you're just almost like comparing it to what's out there, or like trying to live up to, the look that's out there versus trying to just be your own version of an artist.
Yeah.
But I think that takes time.
I wonder if social media didn't exist, what our videos would look like, right?
That's a great question. I know. What is your relationship with social media? How do you feel about it?
Oh, it's like love-hate. I don't know. I love it because I get to connect, like Saskatoon isn't my hometown. So I like to connect with my friends back home, and it's how I stay connected. And it's what drives getting business, right? Like I would say majority of my clients find me on social media. So it's good in that way, but it also feels like I get consumed with like, oh, is this real doing well? But it's like, oh, I wouldn't have thought, like, what defines doing well, right? Is it a certain amount of views? And I don't like thinking that way. And, it doesn't mean that it's a bad video if it got 5 views, right? Like,
right.
Or does it? I don't know. Yeah.
It can be exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. Delaney is good.
Yes, she is good. Speaking of which, you and Delaney recently got back from Paris.
Yes. We had the best time.
Some incredible photos and video. Tell me about that experience.
Like, it was so unique to be, I haven't had it. Oh, how do I say this? Typically, the bride and groom are my clients, right? But we hired models, so they were our clients. So like, they were just like so willing to, help us get the shot. Like they got it. They like knew, like I just had never worked with models before. So it was really awesome. And it was just like, it was so hard to get it down to just a couple shots because it was all so good because they were so good. And we were in Paris, which is so good. Like it was just dream girls trip.
Yeah. It looked amazing. When I look at those images and the video, I'm like, how much of this was just letting this couple like play, or how much was directed? Because I just feel like I was just watching this couple living their life.
Yeah. And it was kind of like that. It was like, chase her is kind of like a prompt, right? Or like things like that. So not so much like, I want you to put your head back and laugh and look to the left. Like it was not very posed, but just like quick direction.
How do you choose to go in really tight on your shots and when to like back up more?
There's like rules. Different videographers and editors will tell you different rules, but it's like, wide, medium, close up, and you should like go through the variation of those. Like it would be like a faux pas to, and I'm saying this because people also disagree, but like going from like a drone shot to like a super close up shot is like maybe a no-no. And so there's like rules of like what shots to go where and at what times, but then you can break the rules, of course, of where you see fit. But I try and go in close if I see some emotion, right? Like I want to be close up because I want to see like your full face versus like the full scene. Whereas I would go wider if it's like a cool scene. If there's like mountains in the background, well, I don't want to go super close because I want to see those mountains. So it just depends on the scene, I think.
Thinking about those rules, which I'm not familiar with. So I'm going to look that up later, unless you want to dive deeper into it.
Well, there are rules that I've learned that other videographers would be like, that's not the rules. Or like, I don't know, some videographers think like cutting the video to the music, like to the beat, like it's like, like your cuts shouldn't go to the beat because that's tacky. But then some love that. Like, so the rules I know, I'm sure other videographers are shaking their head or say it should be a different way, but there are rules.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
When in the small amount of video editing that I've done, I always cut to the beat. I'm like,
yeah, no, I like it.
I think it's because I come from like a dance background.
Yeah.
And so for me, everything has to line up on a beat.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why, but that's interesting that it shouldn't. Or like according to
I like it
rules.
To a beat. I like it to the beat.
Okay.
I think it's like visually, and I don't know, as humans, I don't know. It feels organized.
I like it. And how long do you like to stay on like one scene? Is there a rule with that too? Like 1 to 3 seconds, or could it be longer, or?
Like how long a shot should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the journalism world, they don't like shots to be shorter than 3 seconds. Like that would be horrible. It's too quick of a shot. But when I edit a wedding video, I break that rule all the time. There are shots that are much quicker than 3 seconds. And then between scenes, like I kind of let the speeches and the vows dictate what shots should go where. So if the vows are saying, you know, you have a beautiful smile, then I'll cut to shots of like, or you have the best laugh, I'll cut to shots of the couple laughing, right? Because that's what they're talking about. Or, you know, I try and match what's being said with the footage.
And do you overlay the speeches to just clips then? Like you'll have a shot of maybe them giving the speech and then you kind of cut in shots throughout the day?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And they're scattered. Like when I first started, it was pretty chronological, you know, like I would never have like the reception before the getting ready, because the getting ready happened first. Like it was very like timeline of the day. Whereas now I'll jump around, and that kind of took a lot too, because there are rules. There are these weird videography rules where when I started, it was like, no, yeah, you stick chronological. Why would you ever break that? But now I'm like, nah.
What is that called? Non-linear.
Non-linear. Okay. Yeah.
So that's kind of the rule that you follow now. Or
yeah.
Not? I keep saying rule.
No, but there are kind of, I would say non-linear. Yeah. And it's also weird because like my training, quote unquote, is my journalism degree. Like that's the amount of training I've taken. So that's all I know. But I think I'm sure there are different rules in like a filmmaker course or things like that.
Yeah. So you're balancing 2 careers. What are some of the biggest challenges in juggling journalism and your videography business? How do you keep yourself creatively inspired for both?
I think the actual content of it keeps me inspired. Like I don't feel like I'm hurting for inspiration when I'm editing a wedding video. I think it's just burnout is the thing I struggle with when it comes to juggling 2 things. Like the summers, I'm busy, right? Like working Monday to Friday and then having like a full Saturday, and then, you know, Sunday is really my only free day, but then I'm trying to turn around like a teaser for the couple. So it is like tough, I will say. Like I don't want to like glorify, like I love what I do. I love doing both, but yeah, it is tough in the summer. So yeah, I'm really grateful we're doing this in March.
Yes. I know we're coming around to that season here.
I'd have bigger bags under my eyes if this was the summer, but I just think it's like something has to give. Like in the summer, I have less of a social life. I'm maybe not eating the best or like working out as much. And it's just like, you know, you only have capacity for so much. So other things are going to have to give. And I just have to accept that. Like I can't do it all. And so I've chosen to really focus on weddings, and I choose my careers. So my social life is going to suffer. And that's just kind of the reality. And there are weekends where I'm like, okay, no, I don't want my social life to suffer. So I'm not going to take a wedding because I want to go to the lake with my friends. And that's what I'm choosing. So I have to be very intentional and like not naive that I can do it all, because I can't. So you have to make your choices.
So when you first started in videography, what's a mistake that you made that was a very valuable lesson and has really shaped the way that you work today?
I think when I started, I had a perception of what a wedding video should be. So going into the wedding day thinking this is how it's going to look was a mistake, because it's like, who am I to say how this day will be, you know, like it's going to be how it's going to be, and then I'll edit it accordingly. Wow, I'm Dr. Seuss now.
Nice. Well done.
Feel free to cut that. No, just kidding. That was, you know, maybe someone will give me a book deal. You know what I mean? Though, like, I feel like going into the wedding day thinking it has to be a certain way. And it's just like, no, go into it and take it all in and shoot it and then edit it later. Like, and so that limited me to how I would shoot. Right. Because I was like, oh, it needs to be sad. It needs to be slow. So I'm only going to get these sad and slow shots. If people are like laughing or making jokes, well, that doesn't fit the mold. So I'm not going to shoot that. Like, what a mistake. Like, why wouldn't I shoot everything? You know what I mean? Like, I was selective on the shots because I knew how I was going to edit it. And it's like, I wouldn't ever be selective on the shots now.
Do you do multi-camera? Like, for example, at the speeches, like, do you have a camera that's set up on them giving speeches, and then you're like going around getting short clips of people watching or different things that are taking place at the wedding? Yeah.
So on the speeches, I have one on whoever's giving the speech, one camera on the bride and groom, groom and groom, whoever, the couple. And then usually I'm floating around getting some other like crowd shots.
Yeah.
But typically this is my little hack to get good crowd shots is when they do the introductions or like the MCs give like the house rules and things like that. And MCs are typically funny. So that's when I get all my good laughing shots of the crowd.
Oh, that's great. That's a real hot tip. What kind of cameras do you use?
I shoot all Sony.
Nice. Yeah. Which ones?
I shoot Sony A7S III.
What lenses do you use on them? Do you have are they all pretty wide, or do you, are there some zoom?
Yeah, I like a zoom lens. But I have a gimbal as well. And so it's pretty sensitive to weight. So if it's too heavy, then it doesn't like that. So typically I'll have a prime on my gimbal and then zoom lenses on the tripod.
I have one more question about editing wedding videos. So when you're editing and it comes down to the color correction portion, how much of that do you do? What is your process? And is it different from, say, your broadcasting or journalism? I
would say for the wedding videos, I spend a fair chunk of time color correcting and grading the films and making it look so pretty. But news, there's none of that. Like I'll take down the brightness maybe a little bit or boost the contrast, like little things like that for news. But like I'm on such a tight deadline every day that like we do not have time to like make it very pretty. Like I get my news story at 9 a.m. and then it goes on our broadcast at 6 o'clock. So like it's tight turnaround. I'm interviewed, I get the story, then I go out, I gather the elements, like get the shots, get the B-roll, find my interviews. Hopefully they're available within the hour, 2 hours, right? And I go interview them and then I put it together for 6 o'clock. So it's not a pretty piece of work. Like,
right. It's more about getting the story across versus it being like an artistic piece of work, which would be actually really funny.
Oh yeah.
You submitted these like very like cinematic, like added music and color grading.
Yeah. Oh my, imagine. Yeah.
People would be like, wow,
what is that?
CTV is really up their game.
Yeah, exactly. So there's not much editing that goes into the broadcast. I mean, there's a lot of editing, but it's not like cinematic, I wouldn't say.
What's a piece of advice that you would give a new videographer or journalist about storytelling that could help them improve their craft?
I think you want to shoot to edit is really what will improve your craft of storytelling, because when you're just shooting willy-nilly, like beautiful, pretty shot, but you're not thinking about how it's all going to go together. When you go to edit, it's tough, right? Like, and this might be where photography and videography differ, right? Like a beautiful photo can stand on its own. Like it's okay. It doesn't have to go with all the other ones, but video, it's hard to have just like a standalone beautiful shot. I mean, they exist. You can have like a little clip here and there, but for the most part, it needs to be strung together with other footage. So if you're not thinking about that when you're shooting, then you're going to have a problem when you're editing. And I found myself like that when sometimes I struggle to edit and I think like, why do I hate editing this right now? And it's like, oh, because I don't have enough footage or I don't have the right footage, right? Like if you're shooting a wedding, like you kind of need the shot of people clapping because that's like a transitional shot to get you to the next scene, so to speak, right? So like thinking about editing while you're shooting is vital.
Oh, I think that's so valuable and so important to think of like the bigger picture and the end goal. It's like you're kind of doing that pre-editing work as you're shooting.
Yeah, like if the groom is saying, you know, I love going on walks with you, like I'm paying attention during their vows because I know we're going to have portraits after and I kind of want to reflect those portraits to go with the vows. So if he says, I love going on walks with you, hey, can we get a shot of you guys walking? And then that shot will go over their vows, like different little parts of. Or if the best man during their speech says, you know, I just love having a beer with you. Oh, can I, I'm just going to get a shot of you guys having a beer. Like, and that'll go over top, you know, because that's going to dictate the story. Like the speeches and the vows dictate the story. So I want to make sure it all lines up. Yeah.
Yeah. I've worked on weddings before where I'm also working with a videographer. And then I've also heard some like horror stories, as I'm sure you have too, of like there being some sort of conflict between the two. What do you think makes for a great working relationship between a photographer and a videographer on the wedding day?
Mm-hmm. It makes me sad to hear of all these horror stories between videographers and photographers because I just think like when I get to a wedding, I think of the photographer as like, that's my friend. Like they know more than I do. Like I should learn from them. I'm going to spend the day with them. I'm going to eat supper with them at the end of the day. Like, so honestly, my advice to videographers is like, let the photographer lead, like know your role. And I'm sure some videographers aren't going to like to hear that, but like, I'm happy to stand back. And if I need a shot, I'll shout it out. But for the most part, like the videographer is just capturing candid moments of the day. Like the photographer needs to stage some things. And sometimes the videographer does too. But for the most part, I think just stand back and, you know, I think let the photographer lead. I don't think that's like a big problem. And I think that's worked well with my relationships with photographers is I get to a wedding day and I think to myself, yeah, they're the boss, you know, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I've shot weddings where the photographer is significantly less experienced than me and they tell me that and they say, oh, could you help me? And I'm happy to lead in that case, right? But for the most part, I stand back and it's worked well. And honestly, some of my best friends are photographers and that's how I've made relationships with people. And that's how I get business too. Like typically a client will book photographers first and then they recommend you. So like it's advantageous to get along with the photographer. So, you know, I ask them, hey, I'm going to put a tripod here. Is that okay? Like, you know, feed off each other, right? Like I've heard of stories of videographers putting a tripod right in the middle of the aisle. Like, what are you doing? Yeah,
right. Thinking about it as more of a team versus like, oh, it's all about me or, you know what I mean? Like
100%. Like we're working, like that's my coworker in my eyes. Like it's not me versus you. It's like, we are both hired to be here. Let's get along. Let's give the couple great footage and photos of the day.
Looking ahead, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's a good question. I think still, I don't know what type of video I'll be making, but I just love video so much. So I don't know whether it's documentary, whether it's still news, whether it's videos or wedding videos, you know, I can't pinpoint it, but I know that I just love video so much that I'll always be working with it in some capacity. I'd love to work on like bigger sets. Like I love seeing like behind the scenes photos of like commercials or movies. And I just think it's so cool. So I'd love to work on bigger projects, like just learning, you know, not necessarily being the lead on it, but just learning more about that would be cool. And you know, my resolution for this year was just to like do more cool shit. I just want to do things that are cool and that I'm excited about because I feel like, I don't know if you feel this way with like photography is like, you do so many projects that are not on your terms, like for other people, which is great. I love to do it, but I just want to do things like when Delaney and I went to Paris and we like hired models and went exactly to where we wanted to go. And it was just like selfish. And I want to do more self-serving projects.
Yeah. That's totally fair. And I think you need to, in order to fill your cup. Because if you're constantly giving things away and not doing anything for yourself, you're not going to have anything to give at some point.
Totally.
Do you have any advice you'd give couples that are looking for a videographer?
I think just stalk your videographer. Like, watch what they do. When you watch their videos, like watch a video in their entirety. Like when you watch it, do you get a sense of who the couple is, or is it generic? What are you looking for in your video? Like when I started, there weren't a lot of wedding videos with audio. Like it was basically a music video, right? Like there wasn't speeches or vows. Like it was just music video style. So if that's what you're looking for, like make sure you're paying attention to what other videos look like, because yours will look like that, right?
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And now if people want to book you, where can they find you and take a look at your work?
Yeah. So I have my website, lovelauраvideos.com, or, slide into the DMs, and I'm booking into 2026.
Wow.
So
good
I'm pretty
for you,
excited.
girl.
Yeah. No,
Nice.
It'll be good. I'm like excited to shoot at new venues and change the scenery, but Saskatoon has such a good wedding scene. So
It does. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm excited for you.
Thanks. I'm excited for you too.
Thank you. And I look forward to see where you go from here.
Me too.
Big
Thank
things,
you.
big things and good things.
Thanks for having me. You have the best voice and you need to make audiobooks. That's where you're going. No, I truly feel so calm.
That's good. Maybe I should do like meditation videos or something.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll see.
Meditation with Nicole.
Yes, that is coming up next. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Artist Date. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a rating. It really helps more creatives like you discover the show. Don't forget to follow along on Instagram at Artist Date Podcast for behind-the-scenes updates, inspiring content, and more. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Can't wait to connect with you again soon.